Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Confidently Outspoken. I'm your host, Siggy, and if you're out there looking to build confidence and improve yourself, go ahead and subscribe to this podcast. I publish these episodes every week so you can consistently get better and become the confident person you want to be. If you're someone who is on the hormonal birth control, or you're wanting to transition away from it, make sure that you keep listening on because I have a beautiful guest with me today. Her name is Natasha Godfrey, who is a women's health naturopath that specializes in fertility. Now, you guys know I absolutely love science evidence-based research, tools, and ways to support my health. And what a better way to have Tash with me today, because she has supported over hundreds of women to help them regulate their cycle, and also specializes to transition away from hormonal birth control. Tash, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Sega. This is one of my favorite conversations, so I'm very excited to dive in.
I'm so passionate about this conversation because when I was 13, I myself went onto the birth control for acne, not to navigate my periods. Mind you, my periods were really like heavy and like crazy, and I was like experiencing various PMS symptoms, but like it makes sense. Like I was 13, I was just like in the first cycle of being a woman who is having periods, but yet, I get onto the pill and miraculously I have no acne, but then I am skipping my periods. And then 10 years later, I come off the pill and I start experiencing the same symptoms that I did 10 years prior to that. And my God, it was such an eye opener because I also, didn't know why this was happening because I thought, oh, the pill would help it. But we know for a fact the pill doesn't actually help it. It masks the issues. Guess what? The acne came back in. So I was feeling so insecure as like a 24-year-old woman with face filled with acne, especially around like the jaw, the chin area. Sometimes it will be on my neck. And I know we'll speak about this shortly, that these are common concerns and challenges that many women face when they're coming off contraception. So I want to ask you first of all, what are some other common concerns and challenges that women are facing these days when coming off the contraception? But also from your standpoint, how do you support them with this transition to maintain optimal reproductive health?
Great question. So when we're talking about coming off contraception, whether it's the Mirena, whether it's the pill, whether it's the Implanon, whatever it may be, the Depo-Provera injection, whatever it may be, is all of these contraceptive types are all inhibiting your body's natural production of estrogen and progesterone. And when we come off, usually our body tries to regulate, it's doing its thing, it's trying to come back to homeostasis. And usually what happens is exactly what you said, Sig, is your period, your symptoms, all the things that you experienced prior to going on the contraception will usually come back. Yeah, because your body's just going back to its normal homeostasis. So a lot of the times women go on contraception in the first place is whether it's painful periods, irregular periods, acne is a big one, usually, or sometimes it's just as a contraceptive, is you'll go on it for these reasons, and during that time it'll reduce your symptoms, you'll be feeling amazing, skin might be clearer, you won't have any pain, you'll be having a regular withdrawal bleed, which is not a real period either. And then when you come off, everything comes back, and sometimes with a vengeance. Especially acne usually comes back with a vengeance as well, and it can sometimes make women want to go back on contraception for that reason. However, it's just your body trying to come back to homeostasis. One of the big things, and especially with those of our generation, is a lot of us went on contraception very, very early on. Yeah, some women I've seen that have been on contraception before they even got a period, which is wild. Some women have been on it within the first 6 or 12 months of getting their periods, some women within the first few years, and some unicorns never went on it at all. And the issue here is it actually takes about 7 years for your period to actually fully mature and for you to be ovulating, regularly every single month. And the issue there is most of us have gone on contraception very, very early, too early. Yeah, we shouldn't be going on it until maybe after 18, potentially, when our period's fully matured and maybe when we can make some really sound decisions around our body as well. And that's the issue there, because then when we come off, our body's trying to mature, our body's trying to have a regular cycle, our hormones are trying to mature, ovulation's trying to happen. And that's when we come back with a whole host of symptoms when we come off. And this is what I see very, very often with a lot of women. The best way to support yourself coming off contraception is making sure you know the signs and symptoms of ovulation, especially if you're wanting to avoid pregnancy, which is why a lot of us go on contraception and or stay on contraception. So knowing ovulation signs is a really big one, but also making sure that you're supporting all the nutrients depleted by the pill. So this is the most obvious and easiest one I find. Your things that it's usually depleting is things like magnesium, zinc, selenium, iodine, all of your B vitamins, so on and so forth. So having like a really good quality multivitamin, and some additional, magnesium and things like this, vitamin D, etc., can really be beneficial. Your omegas, you literally need just about every nutrient after being on the pill to replenish your body. Because when you're on any type of medication, your liver is trying to process this medication out of your body every single day, regardless of the medication. And that's just the natural process of the body. And in that process, it depletes all those key vitamins and minerals that your body needs. So that's your liver using more than it needs because you're using a medication, for example. So that's a big thing, is supporting your body's depletions of key nutrients is number one. And then also during that time, you've got a few options in regards to, getting your period back, getting it regular, etc. Is making sure that you give your body a little bit of a break for at least, a month or 6 weeks. And then after that, going and getting some blood tests and then, getting some sort of treatment in there that might support a bit more of hormonal balance depending on what's sort of presenting for you. So that would be usually the first step to regaining your cycle back and getting it regular in the most simplistic approach.
I remember when I came off it, I realized there was like a fluctuation of energy. And as you mentioned, like because being on the pill, you are deficient in so many vitamins and minerals. And yet too often we don't really take that on board and think, oh, this is the case for it. And then you tend to either have worst case scenario of, the PMS and trying to regulate all of that and not noticing that you're having to take more of those nutrients because of everything that was depleted. Also, a thought came to my head, and, correct me if I'm wrong. I've also been realizing, and I've read this somewhere, I can't remember, but they said for women who are on the pill make different partner choices due to the chemicals from is this a thing?
Yes, this is completely true. And I have a laugh about this about myself, but also for clients, is a lot of clients that come off contraception either fall out of love with their partner or make different choices in the people that they're attracted to. And it's a very interesting phenomenon, but it's so true, because when you have your hormones that make they make you a woman, they make you attracted to certain characteristics, certain smells, certain pheromones, etc. So maybe when you were on contraception, maybe you were attracted to a certain type of person, and then you come off and you kind of come to your senses. In a really interesting way. I definitely found that for myself after coming off contraception after a partner, and my partner choices after that were very, very, very different, which is very interesting. And it just goes to testimony of you coming back to yourself as well. And it goes for men as well. If men have low testosterone or, hormonal imbalances themselves or excess estrogen and things like that, same thing likely happens for them.
That's so interesting. Okay, because I was reading it somewhere, and sometimes like there's certain information where you're like, is this true? But now we have the confirmation, and it makes sense. As similar to you, I had poor choices of partners back then when I was on the pill, but which is crazy. But I want us to transition back to coming off the contraception and talking about hormonal imbalances. And as you mentioned, it does often manifest through irregular menstrual cycles, especially coming off contraception. And I would love for you to elaborate about this a little bit more, about the interventions that you use, or even interventions that you've noticed have helped regulate a menstrual cycle. And I'm going to say regulate in quotations because, again, it looks completely different to everyone how to restore this hormonal balance.
Yeah. Yeah, so it really depends what happens. So this is the beauty of it. Everyone's a little bit different. So back in the day, I'll use myself as an example. Back before I was a naturopath, when I came off contraception, I think I was studying at that point. I came off, I had the implants, the rod in my arm. And when I came off, I was like, oh, I'll just let my body see what it does and go from there. So ideally for anyone coming off contraception, you can absolutely supplement some magnesium, B vitamins, zinc, omegas, like a cod liver oil, all these great things, absolutely. But you can do that before you do any sort of, stronger herbals and stuff like that. But I would at least wait for, 6 weeks before you start any more aggressive approach or something that you'd work with a practitioner, for example. But you can definitely do all the more gentle things first. And it depends how long it takes for your cycle to come back. So for me, back in the day, I think it took like nearly 6 to 12 months for my period to come back, which was a long time. So if I knew what I knew now, I would have probably started a more aggressive approach in regards to trying to get my period back. So if you're someone like that, is for the first 6 weeks, start with, all your gentle stuff, eating lots of iron, eating lots of animal protein, obviously sleep, stress management, etc. Not overtraining is really, really important. 4 training sessions a week, quality training sessions is perfect, in my opinion. Those sort of things is really important, and making sure you're eating enough as well. And then potentially considering supplementation or working with someone that can support you with that, whether it's cod liver oil, a really good quality magnesium, activated B vitamins, zinc, selenium, iodine, so on and so forth. So I'd start there. And then after that, depending if your period comes back quite quickly, I see quite often with the pill, and everyone's so different. This is not gospel, but I see quite often after coming off the pill, usually periods come back quite quickly after that. Other contraceptive methods I see usually take a little bit longer. However, everyone is so unique. So it really depends. So depending on how quickly your period comes back, and determine potential treatment. So if your period takes forever to come back, then we'd have to be assessing what's happening there. Is there, post-pill PCOS? Is there, where your hormones are at and things like that? Or if there's any other considerations to make there as well. So I'll definitely be starting there and then going from there, depending on, did your period come back? How long did you bleed for? Are you getting any pain? Are you getting any PMS symptoms? All that sort of stuff. However, for that first sort of 3 months, or you can get all of the above. And that's totally normal, quote in quotation marks, to have some sort of irregularity potentially in that first short period, because you may or may not have been on contraception for a long time. Most women have been on it for a long time. So you've got to give your body a bit of leeway. And then after that, if you're still getting, pain, irregular cycles and things like that, then it's something to consider if it's potentially post-pill PCOS, or if your hormones are still very, very low, and if we need to stimulate something to get your hormones up and get you ovulating.
It also, and you mentioned such good points, because it can be from contraception, but it can also be from other diagnosis, whether it's PCOS, endo, also lifestyle factors. Something that I've been really big on for the past, I want to say 5 years, is on the sanitary use that I use on in my menstrual cycle. Deviating from any toxic products, whether it's like certain tampons or sanitary pads, more towards either the not panty liners, the period underwear, or the menstrual cups. And I know you're very big on the low tox side of things, especially during that time of month. What's your input around that?
Yeah, totally. So it's not going to be something that will directly impact your period per se, or your period coming back in the context of coming off contraception. However, if you are 100% always using organic cotton pads or tampons, or using, you know, your reusable pads or period underwear, they're fantastic. I wish I had them when I was, you know, younger. That would have been fantastic, especially at nighttime. They're amazing. Or using things like period cups or period discs. Your silicone period cups or period discs are amazing. The reason being is because your vagina is super absorbent. Yeah, it's going to absorb anything in contact with it in that mucosal layer. Obviously, you're inserting it into the vaginal canal, and in there, it's very absorbent, and anything that goes into the vaginal canal can go straight to the bloodstream. So it's very important that we're not using toxic products like toxic tampons or pads and things like this, especially tampons, because a lot of these are bleached and have certain dioxins in them that can be absorbed straight to the bloodstream. There's a thing called toxic shock syndrome. Look, it's not, I don't want to fear anyone, but it's not something that happens very often. However, it definitely can. And even if it's a low grade toxin, if we can reduce it, especially in the vaginal canal, I think it's very important to do so for overall health and also for the health of your vaginal microbiome. So your vagina's got its own specific bacterial makeup, and this is really important for overall vaginal health. So you're not getting BV and UTIs and thrush all the time, or discharge or odor. It's really important for that, but it's also very important for fertility and for your reproductive health as well, because if you have any low-grade infection or dysbiosis, then that can cause inflammation in the pelvis. It can also lead to infertility or miscarriages and stuff like that as well. So overall, we don't want to have any sort of infection, because they're very annoying, but also for longevity of your reproductive health as well. So avoiding anything in contact with the vagina that can be potentially toxic or can be absorbed to the bloodstream is, I definitely recommend it. So using, you know, Tom's organic pads or tampons, or your reusable period undies or period cups or discs is very, very, very important. And avoiding things like You by Kotex or Libra, all these other brands that we used to use as young women, and, you know, you wanting to get the cute packaging, and just knowing that, you know, the Tom's Organic, or that's one of the brands that I use, and is very accessible in Australia at most supermarkets or any other certified organic. The thing is, they are a little bit different. So they're cotton, so they don't have that beautiful film on the outside that make insertion really easy and seamless. They're a little bit more tacky, I guess we can say. But definitely recommend organic all the way for those types of items, and especially if you've got young girls, you've got daughters, nieces, very, very important to spread the word for them as well.
I literally have flashbacks of my first time trying to insert a tampon, and I don't think they do it anymore, but there was like the plastic rod, and instead of inserting it with your finger, you would have that plastic rod, place it in and like push it through, and then it goes in. I failed miserably doing that. And I remember just for so many years, I was just using sanitary pads because I just didn't want the headache of that. And then, of course, like grew up, realized, hey, I could literally just stick a fucking finger in there and do it myself. But now I use menstrual cups. And fun fact about the menstrual cups, for those who haven't used it, or even for those who are using it right now, you'll find this really funny. I remember the first time I was playing around with it prior to actually getting a period, just to make sure I know it's like sitting there, okay, it's not going to come out, because there's that fear of you having the cup in there and going, is it going to stay there? Is it going to fall out? You know, you hear all these stories of women going, I deadlift and it just like poked down. I'm like, surely not. Anyway, for a good 5 minutes, I was trying to get it out, not realizing that I don't have to just pull it. I have to like push and use my abdomen muscles, you know, like as if you're going to the toilet. I was panicking. I was like sweat everywhere going, I'm never going to be able to take this out. It's just going to be stuck there forever. Eventually I figured it out, but like horror stories, you know?
I love it. I love it. It's very funny when you do try a period cup or a disc or something or other, and you're not used to it. It feels very foreign. I feel like a lot of women have that aversion to them for that reason, and a lot of women that I know that use them absolutely love them. They're through and through period cups or period discs. It's a very good idea for someone that's got a heavy period as well. I don't know the mechanism specifically or why, or if it's just or just a maybe less accurate observation. But a lot of women that have heavy periods notice when they use a period cup or a disc that their period's not as heavy anymore. So I'm not sure the science or if it's just a less accurate observation. But I do find that, so if you have someone that's got a bit more of a heavy period, one, find out why you've got a heavy period in the first place, if there's any issues there. But secondarily, using a period cup or a disc might be more helpful for you.
You mentioned we were talking about vaginal microbiome and how it has its own place in our health. And
Mm,
I know over time it changes and it's very different to women. But I want us to chat about some of these symptoms because you mentioned um, like thrushes having certain odors or like vaginal mucus. Like, let's run around this because I know it's very common and some women do find it intimidating to ask those questions. For instance, let's say for a woman who is having mucus around her
mm,
cycle and she's unsure why this is happening, or even like having certain smells, because there's certain information out there saying, oh, certain smells are okay, but like what smell is okay?
mhm, mhm. Great question. So, vaginal health is so very interesting and so very important for your overall health. So, when we're looking at vaginal health, so I want to discern one thing first before we dive in. So, any sort of vaginal symptoms, we're going to go through, what's normal, what's not normal. So, when we're looking at reproductive health or your period, cervical mucus is a good thing. So, cervical mucus is different from vaginal discharge. So, two different things. I want to make sure that we're not interchanging the two things, because cervical mucus is when you're ovulating and when you're really fertile. So it'll be egg whitey, watery, creamy. Really, it'll be thin, creamy, egg whitey, or really watery. So it might feel like you've nearly wet yourself, or it might be really wet when you're wiping or when you're having sexual intercourse, for example. So that's cervical mucus. That's healthy. That's good. That sort of cervical mucus, it might not have a smell. It might have a small, a scent, I guess, but it won't be foul or anything like that. For example, it's kind of like it'll just be a small scent potentially, if anything at all. Sometimes it's nothing, but it shouldn't smell where it's like, oh, that's a bit off. Shouldn't be like that at all. Everything coming from your body is going to have some sort of scent. Yeah. It's like if you're sweating. Let's use sweat as an example. So if you're sweating, usually sweat doesn't smell. But if you've got BO, I guess that's sort of the differentiation between the two, for example. Yeah. So cervical mucus, healthy. But when we're looking at vaginal issues or vaginal infections, for example, so your vagina should be really acidic. Yeah. We want a really nice and acidic vaginal pH. And the reason that we want a nice vaginal pH is because it's going to act as a first line defender for any bacteria, fungus, any sort of imbalance to overgrow. So this is a good thing. So if you've got, you're wearing undies and sometimes you wear your favorite black undies and they're a little bit bleach, this is because your vagina is really acidic, and that is a good thing. Yeah. So if you're having any sort of issues like that, that's a great thing. It's not a problem. It's good. Yeah. I'm happy with that. Okay. So pH is very, very important. However, things that can disrupt your bodyguard, I like to call it, it's like when you go to a club and there's security at the door. That's what your vaginal pH is. It's the security at the door. However, things that can cause the security to disintegrate or go elsewhere, or maybe go on a smoke break or something, is washing your vagina with soaps. So absolutely no soaps or using any type of soaps when you're washing your vagina, or any sort of feminine hygiene products. Even having multiple sexual partners, because every sexual partner has their own vaginal makeup. They have there might be another vaginal partner for you, or it might be a man. That is also okay. they also have their own bacterial makeup as well. So very, very important if you're having multiple sexual partners to have protected sex, because otherwise they're disrupting your vaginal microbiome. It's not a great thing. And then also being ejaculated in can also contribute to that potentially. And again, if you've got multiple sexual partners, that exacerbates it. You know, wearing tight, sweaty gym clothes all day. Yeah, if you're doing a workout and then staying in your workout clothes all day, not a great thing either. Or just wearing tight pants and things like that all day long, not the greatest thing overall. So those are just a few things. I'm sure there's more, but those are just some of the most obvious things that can cause your vaginal pH to become more alkaline or less acidic. Also, obviously, having an infection as well. So that's your vaginal pH and things that can disrupt that. So please stop using any soaps. Your vagina can clean itself. Yeah, water only. And then when we're looking at infections, so signs of infections, we use probably the most common one is probably thrush or candida overgrowth. So your vagina should have some level of candida, but when it overgrows is when it becomes a problem. So you might be getting sort of cottage cheese like discharge, itching, you could have burning urination, these types of things. So these types of symptoms are usually from thrush, or you might have BV, for example, where you might have more of an odor. And when we're looking at odor of the vagina, it'll be quite foul smelling. So you'll definitely know if you're like, that doesn't smell quite right. Then you probably have some level of infection. And if it can be sweet smelling, it can be foul smelling, it can smell fishy, or it can just smell a little bit funky. Yeah. So you'll definitely know if it smells a little bit off. It's kind of like when you have, this is probably not a great example, but you know, when you have meat and you're like, I'm not sure if this is off or not. It's probably a great example when you're like, if you're questioning it, then you should probably get it tested. But very obvious foul odor smelling, fishy, sweet, yeasty, for example. So those are the odors, or you can be getting some sort of discharge. So discharge is, you know, it can be gray, green, yellow, these sort of colors, thin. So it's really important to notice if you're having any sort of off discharge that looks a little bit funky and doesn't look quite right. You can also get vaginal itching. You could have potentially had reoccurring miscarriages. These are usually some great signs of any sort of vaginal issues. And sometimes you can be asymptomatic as well. So very, very important. Or even reoccurring UTIs, for example, is another great one. So if you're having any of these types of symptoms, it's very important to get a vaginal microbiome test. So you do a vaginal swab and test to see what bacteria or fungus is overgrown, and if there's any issues like BV, candida overgrowth, aerobic vaginitis, or any sort of other strains or vaginal issues, low pH, high pH, sorry, and things like that. So that would be my recommendation in regards to that and assessing vaginal issues, because they're really important to rebalance that bacteria. And if you do have any of these issues, please make sure you're having protected sex.
Yeah, that's a big one. You mentioned about not washing the puss, and I remember when I first started going down the health room, where you go past the section in the supermarket and it's like femme fresh, you know, the best you know, way of, you know, washing your bits, and I fucking fell for it. I fell for it hard, and I'll be like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is going to help me. Few years later, I didn't realize that how bad it was affecting me. And I'm sure for those who are listening, maybe they're doing this right now. Why is it such a big red flag for not washing with soap?
Yeah, so exactly why I said earlier is because it will increase your vaginal pH. So it makes it more alkaline and less acidic. And that's not a good thing, because if your vagina is not really acidic, then you're going to be more prone to infections. Yeah, whether you're having sex and then getting an infection, or, you know, it's not a sexually transmitted infection, but you'll be getting potentially like BV or candida or an imbalance in the vaginal flora. So very important to just allow your vagina to clean itself. Water is absolutely more than okay. And I think one part to this as well is I have a conversation sometimes with clients around potentially, you know, if you're having sex and then getting an infection, or, you know, it's not a sexually transmitted infection, but you'll be getting potentially like BV or candida or an imbalance in the vaginal flora. So very important to just allow your vagina to clean itself. Water is absolutely more than okay. And I think one part to this as well is I have a conversation sometimes with clients around potentially partners, or maybe they've had past experiences with sex and maybe someone said, oh, it smells or whatever it may have you. The only reason it would have an off smell is if you've got a vaginal infection, and it is very normal to have some level of scent as a woman. Yeah, it is so normal to have some level of scent. It's not going to smell like your favorite perfume by any means. It's a mucosal membrane. It's not going to smell delicious, fantastic, or anything like that. And especially if you're ovulating and you've got some healthy cervical mucus, that's going to have some sort of scent. Yeah, it's not going to be off or foul smelling, but it will have some scent, some neutral scent. So knowing and trusting your body and knowing what you do and don't smell like is very, very normal to have some level of scent. So if someone's telling you that, disregard it. You're a woman and you're natural, and it's normal to have some level of neutral scent. But anything that's off, foul smelling, or that you can smell when you're, sitting or you're at the gym or things like that, then that's probably an issue.
So interesting. I'm pretty sure everyone's gonna be like fucking taking a whiff in a second, being like, is it me? Is it me or is it my vagina? What's happening here? You also made a good point around protective sex, but those who don't practice protection. And I'm sure all of us have been there, with previous partners where you're just like, you can't be bothered fucking putting it on. But you know what? Like safety first. I totally agree with that. And for those who are not having protected sex, I would also recommend getting your partner to get tested, like having their bloods done, seeing if there's any like infection, STIs. Like I'm a full-on police woman when it comes to that. Whichever partner I've had in the past in long-term relationships, prior to having any unprotected sex, I'll be like, cool, like you want to do this, then you have to do this for me. And they did. And I think this is a really cool way to build more of a safe, intimate relationship with a partner.
Mhm.
Why, like, from your perspective, and for a woman's vaginal and cervical health, why do you not recommend having unprotected sex?
Mhm. So definitely for your vaginal microbiome. So if we're talking in the context of maybe you're someone with a history of vaginal infections, BV, UTI, not UTIs, BV or Candida and things like that, then if you're in the treatment of these things, protected sex is very important, because if we're doing treatment on your vaginal microbiome and then you're having sex and disrupting it with someone else's microbiome, then it's going to be really negatively impactful for the treatment. And especially if you've got candida, do not have unprotected sex, because you can give it to your partner or your sexual partner. I've had a client do that. She rang me up, she's like, oh my god, I've just given it to my partner, so I told you to have protected sex. And she was very embarrassed because it was a one night stand.
Oh,
Yeah, it was really funny. We had a laugh about it, but she was very embarrassed. So very important to have protected sex for that while you're doing treatment of your vaginal health. But overall, if it's not your long-term partner, like you said, if you don't know what they do and don't have, then ideally in a perfect world, you would be having protected sex with them, because it is very common to have that imbalance of the microbiome. Everyone's got their own microbiome, and like we were talking about, you are attracted to people that have a similar microbial makeup to you. That's why you're attracted to them, apparently. So it's very important to have protected sex, unless you're with someone and that's your long-term partner, then I'm a little bit more lenient. But very important, because there's things like, HPV is very, very common. For women, and that can cause cervical issues, cervical cancer and health issues thereafter. So it's very important, and a lot of these things go undetected and unnoticed. And they can be asymptomatic as well, and people don't actually have the awareness that they maybe even be a carrier of that, because you don't have to have a physical presentation of it to have that virus. So very important for that. And just for your overall longevity of your health. So it's very important to put yourself first and have protected sex. There's so many amazing condoms out there nowadays that are super thin. They're not like back in the day when we were younger, and or anything like that. But nowadays you have so much access to so many great products. that it doesn't actually make much of a difference. The only thing is people's ego gets in the way of wearing a condom. Yeah. And that was definitely something I experienced when I was younger. I was like, oh, there's that pride that gets in the way. It feels different, blah, blah, blah. All the things that you tell yourself. However, the more you mature, the more you realize that, hey, it's actually not that big of an issue, and take your ego out of it as well. And if someone isn't willing to have protected sex with you, then it's probably not the right person.
100%. I completely agree with that. I want us to finish off with something that you're very big in preaching, and I've been preaching it since we've started talking about a couple of years ago. Is going panty free, letting the girl breathe. We love going braless, we love going pantless on, when we're working from home. Well, I do anyway, but you also say to go panty free. And I want for our listeners to understand why do we need to give the girl, the puss, to be free and breathe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it goes back to what we're talking about in regards to vaginal health. So especially when we're looking at fungus or candida, for example, is if you're in, say, tight gym clothes, or you're a PT, or you're training, or maybe you're just wearing gym clothes because they're comfy and they look good. Yeah, if you're in a humid environment, is where does fungus grow? In hot and humid and sweaty environments. So if you're wearing tight pants all day, specifically gym tights, or even tight underwear, G-strings, or certain synthetic underwears and things like this, is there's going to be a lot of sweat and build up there. Yeah, it's a mucous membrane. It's already quite wet and lubricated anyway. And then that's creating a really good environment for fungus to overgrow. So this is why it's really important to allow, yourself to breathe to some degree, during the day, maybe not so much, but maybe when you're at home, just wearing pajamas without underwear, or going to bed without underwear, and things like this can be really, really important for that. There's definitely times you can wear underwear if you like. However, ideally, at least, at bedtime or with your pajamas, allowing yourself to have some room to breathe is really, really important.
Well, my final message is to let the girl fucking breathe. And I'm sure majority of the women listening to this do train. They do wear tights. They do wear tight underwear. I pretty much live in G-strings. So it kind of makes sense why you need to let it free. And maybe someone's sitting here going, well, when am I supposed to do this? Because I'm working all day. I'm out and about. When you go to sleep, just go underwear less. Let her breathe. If that's the only time that you can do that. Do that. Or when you're wearing dresses, don't wear fucking underwear. Go commando.
I wouldn't go that far, Sig. Maybe if I was at home.
Maybe it's just me.
Yeah, maybe. Depends what you're wearing.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, we know we love a bit of a spice around here. Tash, before we head off, where can our listeners find you, and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so my main portal is Instagram, so you can find me at Natasha Godfrey _ on Instagram. Or if you're wanting more juicy details, I've got a Facebook group, which is a private Facebook group. It's called the Women's Health Secrets. You've got all my masterclasses, live videos, and everything in there. If you're wanting to learn a little bit more about women's health and busting some myths around what to do and what not to do.
Love it, girls. Well, you know where to find Tash, and if you're wanting a healthy puss, fucking reach out to her. So that's what I got for you today. If you loved today's episode, please share it on Instagram stories and tag me at Sig Fisher, SIGFISHER. And with that, I'm going to leave you with the wisdom to become more confidently outspoken every day.